My name is Helen, and I'm a 35-year-old neat freak who loves to be organized. I currently work as an auditor for a well-known company, and my friends frequently make fun of my exacting habits, especially when it comes to preserving receipts and filing taxes on time. But I really do think that these little rituals are what keep my life organized and flexible. I met my husband Scott at a party hosted by Brenda, one of our common friends. I have a clear memory of that evening. When Scott arrived, I was sipping a glass of wine and catching up with some old college friends. He was a little older than I was, but he had a confident gait and a charming smile. He worked for a food sales company as a manager. Putting his arm around me with easy assurance, he said, "Hey, I'm Scott. Would it be okay if I joined you?" With a tight grip on a beer and a pointed look, I answered, "Yes, my name is Helen. It's good to meet you." Our discussion flowed naturally, and soon we were talking about how much we both loved hiking and classic rock. My first interaction with Scott's family occurred when, a few months into our dating relationship, he asked me to a cookout at his sister Margaret's place. It seemed sense that I was anxious, yet Margaret greeted us with warmth as soon as we arrived. On the other hand, her 4 kids were a ball of erratic energy, hurling toys and running all over the place. I greeted everyone with a "nice to meet you all," even though I was uncomfortable with the chaos because the youngsters were getting more and more crazy throughout the evening. With our conversations about the future growing, Scott proposed to me on a beautiful trek with a valley stretching out below us. It was a straightforward but sincere suggestion, just the way I liked it. Margaret's kids again caused a little disruption to our lovely wedding, but they appeared to enjoy a good mess. While Scott shrugged it off, enjoying their happiness, I found it difficult to contain my annoyance and decided not to quarrel in order to preserve the good mood of our day. Scott and I chose to move from renting an apartment to buying our own house after getting married. One evening, during a conversation about contributions to the household and money, Scott shocked me by offering to buy me a new automobile to replace my old one. I was surprised and delighted by the thought, excited about the new beginnings in life that Scott and I would share. "Yeah, it's about time you had something dependable," Scott remarked, grinning broadly and obviously eager to get started. Our search for a home began right away, and a few weeks later, we came across an incredible home. We both felt that, despite its high cost, it was the ideal choice for us. Even though moving in was crazy, I was excited to start decorating our new home. I spent several hours selecting elegant, high-quality equipment and furniture. Scott surprised me with a brand new, shining automobile on Saturday. I hugged him firmly, overjoyed. "This is amazing, Scott." "Many thanks for it." I let out a cry. With a simple smile, he said, "Helen, you're welcome. You are deserving of it." At the beginning, everything seemed ideal as we got situated into our new house. We both loved our careers and looked forward to coming home to our comfortable, well-decorated home. However, as time went on, minor things began to irk me. I used to find Scott's laid-back style charming, but these days I found it annoying, especially when it came to housework. "Scott, can you help with the dishes tonight?" One evening after supper, I inquired. "I had a long day," he replied, casting a weary gaze on me. "Could we not complete them tomorrow?" My irritation was evident. "Scott, we must not continue to put things off. We must keep our home tidy, even though I'm exhausted too," I urged. He nodded reluctantly and rose from the couch. A few months into our marriage, I grew anxious because I was having trouble getting pregnant. It stressed me out significantly. My doctor advised patience, assuring me it would happen when the time was right, but it was still hard not to worry. Meanwhile, Scott's sister Margaret, who lived in the neighboring state, seemed to be visiting us endlessly. It felt as though she lived right next door. On each visit, she would unload all her marital troubles on me. "Helen, you won't believe what Kevin did this time," she would begin, rolling her eyes dramatically. One evening, I tried to change the subject. "Margaret, can we talk about something else for a change?" But she brushed off my hint. "Oh, come on, Helen. I need to vent." "You're the only one who gets it," she would say, oblivious to my discomfort. Her kids were just as exhausting. They turned our home into a circus the minute they walked in, running around, fighting, throwing food, and being incredibly loud. After a long week, all I wanted was some peace, but that seemed impossible. "Guys, can you please calm down?" I would ask, struggling to maintain my composure. "Why are you always so uptight, Helen?" Margaret snapped at me when I tried to get her kids to behave. "They're making a mess, Margaret." "I just cleaned up," I would respond, my patience thinning. Then she hit me with a low blow. "Well, maybe if you had your own kids, you'd understand." Her words cut deep, especially knowing my struggles with fertility. It felt like a physical blow, and I couldn't believe Scott didn't stand up for me. "Scott, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "Helen, calm down. You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, taking her side again. A big deal out of nothing. She just insulted me in my own home. I shouted, tears starting to form. I was so frustrated and done with being undermined and unappreciated in my own space. Living with a constant disrespect in my own home, where my husband always sided with his sister, was wearing me down. It became evident that things needed to change, and they needed to change fast. One Saturday, Margaret arrived unannounced with her 4 kids in tow. "Helen, I need a break from parenting." "I'm going shopping," she declared, dropping her kids off without waiting for a response. The irony of her using the word parenting made me chuckle. Her visits always turned our home into a zoo. "Fine, Margaret, but make it quick," I said, the stress already building up. "Thanks, Helen, you're a lifesaver," she chirped, grabbing her purse and rushing out the door before I could protest. There I was in the kitchen, trying to cook dinner. Cooking is a meticulous process for me, and I like things to be done perfectly. But with the kids causing chaos, focusing was nearly impossible. They were running around, yelling, and making a mess. "Guys, can you keep it down?" I shouted from the kitchen, hoping for a moment of peace. Of course, they paid no heed. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house. My heart sank. I dashed into the living room and found my worst fear realized. My grandfather's antique Chinese vase lay shattered on the floor. My chest tightened with anger and frustration. What the hell happened here? I screamed, facing the kids who now stood still, wearing guilty expressions. "We were just playing," one mumbled, avoiding my gaze. This vase was priceless. It belonged to my grandfather. "Do you understand what you've done?" I was livid, shaking with anger. Just then, Scott walked in, his demeanor calm and clueless. "What's going on, Helen?" he asked, noticing the mess. "Your niece and nephews just broke my grandfather's vase. Look at this mess." I pointed to the shattered pieces on the floor. "Calm down, Helen. It's just a vase." "We can get it fixed," he said, dismissing my feelings as if it were nothing. "Just a vase." "Scott, this isn't about the vase. It's about respect." I'm tired of this. Every time Margaret visits, our house turns into a disaster zone, and you don't seem to care. I shouted, my voice cracking with frustration. Margaret chose that moment to walk in, bags in hand, looking annoyed. "What's all this yelling about?" "Your kids broke my grandfather's vase, Margaret. Look at this mess." I pointed to the floor, trying to hold back my tears. Well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them, she retorted, without a hint of an apology. Are you kidding me? They're your kids, Margaret. I shouldn't have to watch them. I retorted, my hands trembling with anger. Scott shook his head, looking annoyed. You're overreacting, Helen. Just drop it. Overreacting? I've had enough of this. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter in my own home. I screamed, the tears finally spilling over. Scott stood there, silent and cold, while Margaret smirked as if she had won some sort of victory. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the room, overwhelmed by a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. Margaret's chaotic visits had been a recurring issue for months, but I had no idea what was coming next. One morning, as Scott sat at the kitchen table munching on his toast, he casually dropped a bombshell. I need to tell you something. Margaret's getting divorced, and she's moving in with us with the kids for a few months. He announced as if discussing the weather. I nearly dropped my coffee. Are you serious? Our house is already a madhouse. Handling their chaos for a day is one thing, but living with it for months. That's entirely different, I pointed out, feeling overwhelmed by the thought. Scott looked at me earnestly. She's my sister, Helen. She needs our help. You need to be more understanding. Understanding, Scott? I've been extremely patient, but this is just too much. Why can't we rent a place for her nearby? I'll even pay for the first month's rent, I suggested, trying to find a middle ground while keeping my composure. No, she'll be better off here. Plus, you can help with the kids and keep things clean. He responded as if the arrangement couldn't be more obvious. I'm not a babysitter, Scott. I work full-time too, and I need my downtime when I get home, I retorted, my frustration peaking. Stop being so selfish, Helen. It's family. They need us, he snapped, his tone growing sharp. I'm not being selfish. I'm looking for a reasonable compromise. I won't let my life be completely disrupted, I countered, my anger rising. Well, they're coming tomorrow evening, so you better get used to the idea, Scott said abruptly, standing up and leaving the kitchen. I was stunned. I felt blindsided and betrayed. The next morning, still upset from our argument, I dressed for work and went to grab my car keys, but they were missing. When I called Scott, his tone was too calm. I took the car. It's mine, remember. I'm giving it to Margaret so she can use it for the kids, he informed me nonchalantly. You're giving my car to Margaret? Are you serious right now? I managed to say, shocked. It's not your car, Helen. I paid for it, and she needs it more than you do, he said matter-of-factly. That was the last straw. You've taken everything from me, and I'm done, I said, my voice trembling with resolve. What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic, Helen, he replied, missing the gravity of the situation. I hung up, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare. How had things deteriorated so badly? I called a moving company immediately. Hi, I need a team to move some furniture and appliances today. It's urgent. The movers arrived a few hours later. I directed them around the house, pointing out what to take: the beds, sofas, chandeliers, and even the faucets in the bathroom. Watching them remove each item, I felt a peculiar sense of relief. Everything goes to my mom's house. Thanks for the quick work, guys, I told them, handing over a tip. With the house now empty, I gathered my essentials and drove to my mom's place. Later that day, my phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from Scott, which I ignored, feeling a mix of anxiety and empowerment. That evening, a loud knock rattled the door. I opened it to find Scott furious. What the hell, Helen? What did you do? He shouted as he stormed into the living room. I took my stuff, Scott. You took the car, so I took what I bought, I replied calmly. This is insane. You stripped the house bare. Where are Margaret and the kids supposed to sleep? He yelled, his face flushed with anger. That's your problem, Scott. You made this mess. Now you deal with it, I said, folding my arms. You're a thief, Helen. You stole everything, he accused, waving his arms frantically. I didn't steal anything. Here are the receipts, I responded, pulling out a folder and showing him proof of purchase for all the furniture and appliances. He flipped through the receipts, his anger turning to frustration. Fine, Helen. If this is how you want to play it, I'll file for divorce, Scott said bitterly. I took a deep breath and handed him a stack of papers. Already done. Here are the divorce papers, and we're done, I stated, his face turning pale as he stared at the divorce papers. You're serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious, Scott. I deserve better than this, I replied, a strange sense of calm settling over me. Without another word, he took a pen from his pocket, signed the papers, and handed them back to me. Fine, Helen. Have it your way. I watched him walk out of my mom's house, the door slamming shut behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. It was over, and deep down, I knew it was the right decision. That night, I sat down with my mom and recounted everything that had happened. She listened, her presence comforting, and when I finished, she nodded in agreement that I had made the right choice. Helen, you've been through so much. It's time you focused on yourself and your happiness, she said, hugging me. Thanks, Mom. I just need some time to figure things out, I replied, feeling as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. In the days that followed, I began to settle into a new routine. I started organizing my space at my mom's house and thinking about my next steps. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had reclaimed my life, and there was no turning back. After the divorce, Scott and I sold our house and split the proceeds. I decided it was time to find a place of my own. While my mom's house was a great temporary sanctuary, I needed my own space. One afternoon, while sitting in the kitchen with my mom, I scrolled through apartment listings on my laptop. Mom, I think I found a place that looks perfect. It's a small apartment downtown, close to work, I said, showing her the pictures. She leaned over my shoulder and smiled. That looks nice, Helen. Have you called the realtor yet? Not yet, but I'm going to do that right now, I said, a bit excited. I dialed the number and waited for the realtor to pick up. After a few rings, a friendly voice answered. Hello, this is Raymond. How can I help you? Hi, Raymond. My name is Helen. I'm interested in the apartment you have listed downtown. Is it still available? I asked, crossing my fingers. Yes, it's still available. Would you like to schedule a viewing? He replied, sounding hopeful. Absolutely. How about tomorrow afternoon? I suggested, trying to maintain my composure. That works for me. I'll see you at 4:00 p.m., Raymond confirmed before we ended the call. The next day, I met Raymond downtown to view the apartment. He greeted me with a warm smile outside the building. Hi, Helen. Nice to meet you. Let me show you around, he said, shaking my hand. The apartment was small but cozy, just what I needed. It featured a nice kitchen, a spacious living room, and a small balcony with a decent view of the city. This place is perfect, Raymond. I'll take it, I declared, a sense of relief washing over me. After signing the lease agreement and receiving the keys, I started planning my move. I wanted to make this new space truly my own, a fresh start. I spent the next few days packing up at my mom's house and arranged for movers to handle the larger items. On moving day, my mom watched as the movers loaded up the truck. She hugged me tightly, her eyes moist but her smile proud. "You're doing the right thing, Helen. I'm proud of you," she said. "Thanks, Mom." "Here's to new beginnings," I replied, feeling ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms and an open heart. As the last box was hoisted into the moving truck, I felt a swirl of excitement and nerves about stepping into this new chapter of my life. "Helen, this is going to be great for you. A fresh start is just what you need," my mom said, wrapping me in a comforting hug. "Thanks, Mom. I'm looking forward to it," I replied, smiling broadly. We drove to my new downtown apartment, and with the help of my mom and a couple of close friends, we quickly got everything unloaded and set up. As I surveyed my new surroundings, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and I was ready to embrace it. That evening, to celebrate the move, I invited my mom and friends to stay for dinner. We ordered pizza and gathered on the floor amidst boxes, raising our glasses of soda in a makeshift toast. "Cheers to Helen and her new place," my friend Brenda exclaimed. "Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your help and support," I said, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. As the night progressed, we shared laughs and stories, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy and free. Later, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights, I reflected on everything I had been through and how much I had grown. I was proud of myself for taking control of my life and making the necessary changes. From mutual friends, I learned that Scott had used his share of the money to buy a small apartment where he now lived with Margaret and her 4 kids. He was working 3 jobs to manage the bills while Margaret remained unemployed, and they were constantly arguing. Then unexpectedly, Scott called me one day. Seeing his name flash on my phone screen was a surprise, but curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Hello, Scott. What's up?" I responded, maintaining a neutral tone. "Helen, please, just hear me out," he began, his voice tinged with desperation. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize how hard it was for you with Margaret's kids." I couldn't help but chuckle slightly. "Really, Scott? You're realizing this now, after all this time?" "Yeah, I know it's late, but I'm serious. I've been thinking a lot, and I miss you." "I miss us. Can we start over?" "I'm ready to move into your apartment and make things right," he said, his voice almost pleading. I shook my head in disbelief, a chuckle escaping my lips. "Scott, you've got to be kidding me. You think you can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened?" "Helen, I'm serious. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll even take on more work to make it up to you," he insisted, sounding more desperate. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. "Scott, it's too late for that. I've moved on. I'm building a life I love, and there's no room in it for the kind of drama you bring. I wish you the best with your situation, but I'm not interested in going back. Goodbye, Scott." With that, I ended the call, a sense of finality settling in. As I turned back to the city lights, I felt a renewed sense of freedom. I was ready to move forward on my terms, without looking back. I've moved on. I'm happy now, and I'm not looking to go back to that mess, I replied firmly to Scott. "Come on, Helen, we can make it work this time." "I've changed," he insisted, a mix of desperation and hope in his voice. Feeling a mix of pity and irritation, I responded, "Scott, it's over. You need to focus on your own life and your family. I'm not interested in going back to that chaos." "Helen, please. I'm begging you," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "Scott, no. I found peace without you, and I'm not giving that up," I said, standing my ground. "Take care, Scott. I hope you find your way. I ended the call with a peculiar sense of closure and relief. Scott was obviously having difficulties, but I couldn't allow his issues to drag me back into the predicament I had fought so hard to get out of. I had coffee with Brenda later that day and told her about this strange experience. "You won't believe who called me today," I said, amusingly rolling my eyes. "Who?" Brenda questioned, her eyebrow going up in wonder. "Scott. He begged me to let him move into my apartment and take him back," I recalled, shaking my head in shock. With a laugh, Brenda nearly spat out her coffee. "Are you serious? How did you say that?" Without a doubt, I told him no. With a smile on my face, I answered, "I'm not going back to that mess." We left and talked for the remainder of the afternoon, and I realized how far I had come. I had created a tranquil and contented new life for myself. I refused to allow anyone to take that away from me. Later, when I was walking home, I experienced a profound sense of contentment and tranquility. I was finally done with that difficult phase of my life and felt confident and happy enough to move on. I felt more and more confident about the promising future ahead of me with every step, as the city around me appeared to reflect my newly discovered freedom.